Yeah, my parents were very much against it. There was one point where they're watching this, so they don't actually know this part. But I told them that I was leaving to, live at I don't know if it was Airbnb or something. I don't know. Just like not live with them because they were not for it. But I actually didn't live anywhere. I was like homeless for like a week or two, and I was.
Oh, really?
And so the hardest part about that is just honestly getting sleep, because I would, like I said, I'd sneak into NYU computer lab. I would play League. I'd grind, try to get better at the game, and there's nowhere you can sleep. So I'd like try to like sneak into, like the lobbies of colleges, but they'd kick you out. So the best solution I found was to sneak into a classroom at like 2 a.m. and sleep there for like 4 hours, and then get up and like go about your day.
You were like, wait, you were actually like legit homeless. Like you were just like a nomad person. You were walking around. You would go to the computer lab, play League of Legends, and then probably.
Yeah, and then I spent like $2 at McDonald's. They had a deal at the time where you get your receipt, and then with your receipt, you fill out a survey online, and then you get like a free sandwich with that. So I would get like their double quarter pounder, and then get a second double quarter pounder for free, and then that's what I'd eat the whole day.
Jesus Christ. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Minds of Media. My name is Blake Pandashevitz, and today's guest is someone who used to be a player, but is now a notable coach, having coached teams like FlyQuest, EchoFox, Clutch Gaming, which became Dignitas, and is now a free agent on the market. Please let me introduce Thomas Slotkin, maybe better known as Thinkcard. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited to have you on the show. We talked a little bit beforehand. I don't think you've ever done an interview like this. I went through a lot of your interviews and different stuff. That is like the only way that I can do this show is by researching a ton on you. So I'm excited to kind of get to know you a little bit better. So we're going to start it off easy with the questions that I'm going to ask you. I was looking through your Twitter, and one of the things that I noticed is you seem to be terrible at baking fucking cookies. Please tell me, for the love of God, you now know how to bake cookies.
Oh God, what was that? That was with FlyQuest. It was me and it was Moon and I trying to make cookies, and we probably forgot an ingredient, but it just came out as like a thin sheet of the most disgusting thing, but it tasted amazing. So I will say,
your cookie bake now. You're just gonna do.
I haven't attempted since, but I'm just gonna stand by it. Balls gave that a 10 out of 10. So. What can I say?
I don't think that qualifies as a cookie. That's all I'm going to say. I think it's more of like a cake at that point. So yeah, baking, scrolling through your timeline. First of all, I will say you look older. Like if you look at your younger pictures now, I think you've aged, which I think is good. I have not aged at all, unfortunately. So, but that's cool. One of the other things that I noticed when I was kind of looking through like some of your history and stuff, I noticed that you mentioned someone probably known as like the Iceman, maybe better known as Wim Hof. He does these really interesting breathing techniques, and I think he has the record right now for standing in like an ice bath or like frozen water. Is this someone that you utilized in your coaching philosophy? Is he like a really big part of like Thinkcard does Wim Hof esports coaching?
Yeah, we did not. I mean, that's about what he brings. Oh yeah, he brings people into the mountains, and then they wear like just like boxers and underwear, and they're in like sub-freezing temperatures, and you're supposed to like control your body heat through like breathing exercises. Yeah. And I don't think that has its place in esports as of now. But maybe in the future, I'll bring him out and we'll do a little sub-freezing mountain climbing in like Colorado.
I don't
know
if you had seen some of his other stuff too, because I know he does different like morning meditation and breathing techniques. I've always kind of found it interesting, and I wasn't sure how much of that maybe you were like, yeah, maybe I'm going to implement this, because people talk about yoga, meditation, and esports, which I always find an interesting subject. Not that it's bad, but it's one of those things that people are like, oh, your players are burning out, have them do yoga or meditation. Like that is a suitable solution to the problem all the time. So I wasn't sure how much you kind of fell into that stuff.
Well, I'll say the thing with, at least in esports, with yoga and meditation is you just need the players to, like, some players are going to buy into it and others are not. They're going to think the process is a waste of time. And that most players will do it anyway, but obviously you just have mixed results. Like you can't just, like you said, you're not just going to be able to throw a team into a yoga session and everyone's going to come out feeling great and ready to be amazing teammates and just like smurf the whole day. But but it has its place.
Yeah, I agree with that. So one of the cool things about you is that you mostly grew up in New York City, if I have that information right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. How does it feel living in LA with their shitty pizza?
Honestly, I do miss New York pizza.
I've never had it, but I heard it's the best.
I do think it's the best, but LA food is still pretty good. So I'm not gonna just shit all over LA food. It's got its ramen, it's got its Asian food, like just LA food, nothing to complain about.
Okay. That is one of the things that I noticed when I lived in LA is that I think that their like Korean and Asian food is very good. I felt like everything else was kind of subpar, to be honest. Like I felt like Chicago was just a much better place. Like I'd rather just eat in Chicago for like most food. I've never been to New York, but I think for most food, I think I would just rather eat in Chicago.
Chicago, interesting.
Yeah, Chicago's really good food.
I was actually just in Chicago, and I had their deep dish pizza for the second time in my life. So
from where? This matters.
Okay, one of the better places. Name the top 2 places.
Okay, so people always go to like Luminati's is one, or Pequod's is another one, or Geno's. Those are like the 3 that you hear all the time.
I think it was Geno's, but now I don't know because none of those names sound like the one I went to.
Okay, so there's one place in Chicago for pizza that I would recommend going to, and it's technically not deep dish. People call it deep dish, but it's technically not deep dish. It's called Pequod's, and basically it's a thick crust where they, maybe it's closer to like Detroit style, but they like caramelize the edge of the crust, which is really what makes it so delicious. But it's not like too thin pieces of crust with like cheese and stuff, which is kind of what a stereotypical deep dish is. I love pizza, by the way. It is my favorite food, and I eat a lot of it. But yeah, there's actually places in, like if you ever go to Chicago, there's this one place that makes tapas called the Purple Pig. It's very hard to get into, and you can normally get into it same day, but you have like a wait time normally of like an hour and a half to 2 hours to get into it. But it is one of the best places I think I've eaten in Chicago, and I definitely have you ever had tapas?
I have had tapas, but not from the Purple Pig.
It's good. Highly recommend. So but yeah, food, stuff like that's always interesting. So what is New York City like for someone who hasn't been there?
Honestly, I love New York City. I would say the thing that shocks people the most is it's not the cleanest, obviously, but subway system, very efficient. You can get anywhere you want for maybe it's more than $2.25 now, but it used to be $2.25, and you get free transfers. So legit, you go anywhere in the city. It's beautiful, amazing parks. Obviously, Central Park is the famous one. Really nice museums. That's something I don't think I really took. I kind of took that for granted as a kid. But whenever I go back, I usually visit the museums because they're amazing. And then it's just, for me, my favorite part is just walking around at night, because you have the lights, you have everyone like really excited. Like I just love the energy. So that's my favorite part about New York City, is walking around at night with either by yourself or with some friends and just enjoying the city.
That's nice, because I know when I lived in LA, that isn't really an option, at least where I lived. And I lived in like more north LA. It's not easy to get around in LA. Just in general, there's no public transport really.
Yeah.
Maybe there's public transport where you're at, but where I was at, there was absolutely none. Your drives are looking at like an hour plus if you're driving someplace. Did you miss that a lot when you live in LA?
Yes. I mean, in LA, like you said, you kind of need a car. And so transportation, not the same. You can obviously Uber everywhere now, but it's not as convenient as paying $250 and going anywhere you want.
Did you are you still a New York resident, or are you a California resident now?
California resident.
Okay. I mean, were you a little bit worried with Prop 22, where Uber and Lyft were looking to possibly go away? Was that something that maybe slightly worried? Because I could see not having Uber and Lyft in LA being terrifying.
Yeah, it was a little scary. Obviously, that prop has a bunch of hidden things. I don't know if we want to get into that, but
yeah, go ahead. I wouldn't mind you talking. Like I said, my goal for this show is to show who you are as a person, and sometimes talking about politics is the best way to show what type of person you are.
Well, I'd probably rather avoid Prop 22 in general, but I think it's good that Uber and Lyft are there because, like I said before, transportation is it's tough in LA, so we need that. Yeah.
So. That makes sense. I don't know if they would have went away with it. That's the only thing, is like if I think it passed pretty right? If I remember correctly, it passed pretty heavily, right?
Yeah, it did. Everyone was behind it, pretty much.
Yeah. So I don't know if they would have even left if it wouldn't have. That would have been interesting, though. But yeah, it's weird how those hidden details get put into things rather than it bothers me so much. Like, I'm okay with like certain things being out there, but they try to hide things all the time in politics, and it just bothers me.
Yeah, I mean it's the easiest way for things to get passed is you're a little misleading, and then everyone hops on board, and then you kind of get to pass like certain things. So
yeah, I mean, in a way, I think esports is kind of like that too, isn't it? Where basically, like, all of the PR notifications, stuff like that, it seems pretty straightforward, but it never is it?
There's usually a hidden motive behind most things in esports.
You like how I drew that over there? That was pretty good, right? That was
a good connection.
Yeah. So looking at New York City, you actually have a twin brother.
I do have a twin brother.
Which is cool. I saw an earlier picture, and I will say you two look very... I don't know if you still look similar, like if one of you could grow facial hair or does, or if the other one can't. But you have a twin brother. Were you guys are like completely twins, like born at like seconds apart type twins?
I actually was born 4 minutes before him, so I won. That's very important, by the way.
Yeah.
But we do look very similar. We're fraternal. Actually, we're not identical, but everyone thought we were identical. Now we look a little bit different, but we still look very similar.
Okay. What does your brother do for a living?
He is a software engineer, and he works at an insurance company right now.
Ooh. That is, I don't know if that's necessarily exciting being for an insurance company. That's kind of cool. Yeah. Now, what I find kind of interesting about that is both you and your brother at least seem to be people who, it looks like your life was something that was going to be successful no matter what. I know for a while you were thinking about becoming a doctor, which I find fascinating. Did your parents push this like work ethic on you guys growing up? Was it like, hey, you guys have to like strive for things? What was your life growing up with your parents?
So I actually have two other brothers as well. So I have my twin brother, Peter, and then I have an older brother, William, who's 2 years older than me. And then I have another brother, Matthew, who's 4 years older than me. And I don't think our parents really forced us to overwork at all. They were pretty lenient in just making sure that we're getting our work done and that we're trying in school. And so it's kind of on us to not fall off the deep end. But yeah, all of my brothers are pretty successful in terms of like where they graduated from. Like my oldest brother, Matthew, graduated from Yale. My second oldest brother, William, graduated from UPenn. And then Peter, my twin brother, graduated from Middlebury, which is like an amazing liberal arts college. So they all are on like the path to success. And I just went into esports, which was very worrying for my parents.
Especially when you got into it pretty early. Like I think LCS was around a little, but it wasn't the same LCS. It wasn't like the franchise leagues that we have now. I believe, because I remember Phoenix One still being involved. There were still relegations and stuff like that, which made.
I remember negotiating for my. I negotiated hard to get my $500 a month contract.
That was that juicy.
Yeah, it was nice.
God, it's so weird how League of Legends how far it's come. If you look at it like now, it's kind of crazy how much it is went from almost nothing to like looked upon or looked down upon to now it's like you will make more than a doctor. Like some doctors or nurses or some like engineer, you're potentially making more depending on what you're doing. In League of Legends for coaching, or at least head coaching, I'm pretty sure you're probably making more than most engineers. In Overwatch, not so much guaranteed. That's an interesting thing there.
Yeah, it's come so honestly. It really hit me at when was the last World Finals in China? I think it was 2017. I was actually there at the World Finals in like the Beijing Olympic Stadium, and it was packed. And like they had this amazing intro with the Elder Dragon, and I'm just sitting there, and it's like, this is so crazy that esports has gotten this big. We're literally in the Olympic Stadium. It's sold out. Everyone's going crazy. And I remember just like, I don't know, just playing video games growing up and liking it. And it's just so crazy that like something that is so enjoyable that brings people together is finally this accepted. And it's just amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's wonderful. What did your parents do growing up? Like what did they do for a living?
So they both worked in finance. My mom put herself through college. She had, I mean, she had a parent which didn't really believe that women should go to college, so she had to put herself through college, which is pretty amazing. And then she formed like a really nice career for herself at Bank of America, and now she's like one of the female leaders in terms of educating some of the women in power, like how to be successful and kind of tear down the barriers. So
that's awesome.
And then my dad has been working in finance pretty much his whole life, and he's still working. So
was finance ever something you were like, you know what I want to do with my life? I want to do finance. Or is it the exact opposite where you're like, I never want to touch finance in my whole goddamn life?
I mean, I think working in business sounds really interesting. It's just I don't know. It just sucks that you can only kind of choose like a few specific things to go into. Because obviously, like, I'd want to try being a doctor. I'd want to try being in esports. I'd want to try going into business. I want to try like being a lawyer. But like, you just don't have enough opportunity to do all of that. So you just have to pick what you think you're going to enjoy the most, and that is somewhat stable.
How do you do that at the age of, I don't know, 16, 17, 18? Because for me, it doesn't make any sense. I think college is I don't want to say scam is probably not the right word, though in America maybe it is because of how much you have to pay. But maybe false expectations. You're basically taught that you always like your only path to success. At least I was taught through school and stuff is through college. Right. But it doesn't really tell you like what is it you're going to want to do? What decision are you going to make that is you're going to be happy with the next, fucking 70 years of your life? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's impossible. I mean, it really is impossible. Also, because it's really hard to tell when you're like 16 or 17 whether you're actually like good at something. Like everyone obviously hears about like the professional league players that, drop out of high school and then they make it and they go pro. But there are so many people that try to do that and they just don't make it. And it's not even just league, like basketball, football, like every single sport. There are tons and tons of people, even artists, trying to make music. It's just such like a popular thing for everyone, or everyone wants to do it. And we hear the success stories, but they're obviously like, it's a separate side of the coin. So it's really, really risky. I wouldn't say I recommend it, but there are better paths now. Like I know Clerky at Maryville, there's amazing eSport collegiate programs coming out, which are going to make it a more stable path where you can actually get your degree while, working on your mechanics, working on your team play, working on your League of Legends skills. And then after that, you can try to look to go pro if you still want to.
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably what I would recommend too, is going to college. Most people, when they say, hey, how do I get into esports, or should I get into, I almost always tell them you shouldn't. Like you just shouldn't. You should find, I've always said, I think it's better to have a different path that works out and side transition into esports if you can. I think that is a much safer bet.
It's a way more stable. I will agree with that.
And that's what I did too. So like that's why I feel like maybe I do recommend that, is because I think that you don't hear about the horror stories, and there's got to be, for every one success story, there's got to be thousands of horror stories that just don't work out.
Yeah.
So when you were growing up, if I can talk, when you were growing up, you obviously chose to go to school, very briefly to go to university before you switched into League of Legends. But going through high school, how did you come to the decision that, I want to be a doctor?
Honestly, I was always really good at just math and science. So I always wanted to do something science related, whether it's physics or biology or chemistry, but chemistry never seemed as exciting to me. But obviously, when I applied to go to college, I'm looking at the possibilities. I don't know, being a doctor really stood out for me. I was also a big fan of Scrubs, so obviously trying to be a doctor because it's my favorite show. But it's I don't know, it's a combination of helping people, a combination of figuring stuff out, because I want to be the person that diagnoses, so the person that comes in asks for all the symptoms, family history, combines that, and then orders tests based on like a logical thinking process.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that kind of pulled me the most, is just I can help people, I can use my analytical thinking, which is what I like to do, and I can feel fulfilled.
Okay. It's interesting how close those almost like base ideas actually relate to League of Legends. Like all of those things kind of still apply. Have you always been someone though that wants to help people? Has that been something that you've kind of always been?
I'm not sure. Maybe, probably not all the time, but it's always felt good. I mean, I think everyone feels good when they help someone. But it's nice to be able to be proud of what you do, which for me, which I've learned even more as I've gotten older, is very important to me, is just to make sure that you're proud of where you are, or what you've accomplished professionally or health-wise, or something. Like, you need something in life that's giving you confidence. And for me, taking that confidence from my professional accomplishments and like my work ethic is definitely important.
So you go to be a doctor. Was it just easy to pick the school? Was it like, oh yeah, Cornell, I'm going to Cornell?
Well, my dad went to Cornell, so it was something where it would be cool to go there too, as a father-son dynamic. But they also have really good programs, and in terms of the specific college at Cornell that I applied to, it was very open in the sense where I obviously have to take my core classes, but I had a lot of freedom in other classes that I can take. And so if I wanted to take a few classes in computer science while I'm, going through my biology degree, or if I wanted to, at the time I took 3 years of ancient Greek in high school. So I was like, if I wanted to keep learning ancient Greek in college, I'd be able to do that while
Is
being
it like history or like language?
No, legit, the ancient Greek language.
You learned ancient Greek language.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, Latin and ancient Greek.
Really? Has that ever been useful?
No.
Okay. Never know. I don't know. One day maybe you say some ancient Greek philosophy statement to like some player or something, and then they're like, "What does that mean?" And you give this like huge philosophical monologue, and it changes their life profusely, or I don't know.
Maybe once every year I'll hear a word that I don't know like the English meaning, and I'll be like, maybe it came from this, and then there's like a 50% chance it actually did.
Oh, okay.
That's as far as they come.
What made you so interested in ancient Greek language? That's such an odd thing. Like,
I hated speaking and learning French, and so I wanted to switch. And ancient Greek seemed appealing because I already started taking Latin, and I liked Latin. And because Latin, once again, is just, since I don't have to speak it, it's very just, the rules, what you see in front of you. It's just logic and analytical thinking, and then you can figure out based on the endings and like matching everything up. And ancient Greek is very similar, so I don't have to worry about speaking it. It's just kind of like a puzzle, and you solve it.
Interesting. Huh? Do you view players kind of like that, as a puzzle and you need to solve sometimes?
I guess. I mean, I don't think I've ever actually thought of them specifically as a puzzle, but now that you mention it, I'm sure everyone could be considered a puzzle. So
yeah, I mean, I view people as puzzles, so that's why I was kind of, because you like puzzles so much, and so I wasn't sure if you're like, oh, this is the one thing that I need to do to make this player better, or if you look at like, I mean, I imagine you probably do analytically break down, okay, here's the weak spots, here's what we need to do to fix. I'm sure that you probably do that.
Yeah, or even just like personality wise, like some players are, I'd call them like confidence players, where you need to make sure that their confidence is always high, because as soon as they start to doubt themselves and like they play badly, whereas other players, they can kind of deal with that heat and that criticism and use that to fuel themselves. So they're definitely, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like every player is wired differently, and you have to figure out the proper way to get the result.
Yeah. I think that's I'm gonna delve into more of your coaching philosophy. I'm very excited about that because I had a few head coach or like coaches on here, and it's always interesting to see how they differ in like philosophy with coaching. So I'm very excited to get into that. So looking at just finishing up like your college, so you're in college, okay, and you're obviously playing League of Legends. At what point do you say, you know what I want to do, Mom and Dad? I want to drop out and go to California and live there.
Well, actually, after a year and a half of college, I got suspended for not getting amazing grades.
Oh,
so,
wait. Now we have to go back and ask a follow-up. Why weren't you getting, was it just too much partying? Were you just having too much fun? Like
a combination of hanging out with friends and playing League of Legends. And then I dropped out. I told my parents. They were honestly pretty accepting. Like, it happens. They weren't like super pissed. Obviously, they were upset.
Okay.
But they wanted me to like go back. So obviously, the way to get back into college is you get suspended for a year, and then you don't really apply back in, but you just make your case, and they usually bring you back in as long as you're not wasting your time. So I took some classes at NYU. I took some classes at the community college. I think it was Hunter, and but honestly, at that point, I really wanted to go into League of Legends, so I would constantly ask my parents about doing that, and they were against it. And yeah, there was this whole thing, and I don't know if we should get. I don't know if you want to get into that.
I do kind of want, because I think that the reason I want to is because I don't think people see a lot of this side, like the cost sometimes of trying to do things and the negative side that can be there, and a lot of times it ends up working out for those success stories. But if you don't, like, it should be another thing that, am I willing to risk this level of thing before I make this decision?
Yeah. So yeah, my parents wanted me to get back into Cornell, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to play League. And so I would constantly, ask them. I think they took away my laptop. I didn't have a computer. I just had there was a family computer that obviously was in the middle of everything, so they would make sure I wasn't playing games. And so the only way I can play League of Legends was to sneak into the NYU computer lab and download League of Legends, which I had to do every day because the computer's reset. And so I'd sit there for like an hour downloading League of Legends, and then I'd be able to play. And then obviously I'd leave eventually. But yeah, my parents were very much against it. There was one point where they're watching this, so they don't actually know this part. But I told them that I was leaving to, live at I don't know if it was Airbnb or something. I don't know, but just like not live with them because they were not for it. But I actually didn't live anywhere. I was like homeless for like a week or two, and I was.
Oh, really?
And so the hardest part about that is just honestly getting sleep, because I would, like I said, I'd sneak into NYU computer lab. I would play League. I'd grind, try to get better at the game. And there's nowhere you can sleep. So I'd try to sneak into, the lobbies of colleges, but they'd kick you out. So the best solution I found was to sneak into a classroom at 2 a.m. and sleep there for 4 hours, and then get up and go about your day.
You were wait, you were actually legit homeless. You were just a nomad person. You were walking around. You would go to the computer lab, play League of Legends, and then probably.
Yeah, and then I spent $2 at McDonald's. They had a deal at the time where you get your receipt, and then with your receipt, you fill out a survey online, and then you get a free sandwich with that. So I would get their double quarter pounder, and then get a second double quarter pounder for free, and then that's what I'd eat the whole day.
Jesus Christ. That's insane for League of Legends, right? That just sounds
there are more stories coming up, even especially in for some Chinese players and Korean players where their parents are against it, of kids doing similar things. So more stories are popping up.
Slowly. You don't hear about it a lot in NA, I think, as much. You don't hear about that level of, I'm willing to take that. Was it at the time, was it worth it? How did you get through the days being did you think about it at all, or was it just this is whatever? Because my thought would have been Jesus Christ, I'm homeless. What the fuck am I going to do with my life? Also, if your parents are watching, I'm sorry, I swear a lot. Okay. I apologize in advance.
What was the question? How did I get through the day?
Yeah, how are you not thinking about what am I gonna do for my living situation?
Well, I had some money, obviously not a lot, and then I ended up getting rank 1, so it was pretty easy to justify in my head that it was working, and then after that, my friend Sam, who was on an amateur team called Gamester Gear at the time, he messaged me and he was like, "Yo, do you want to play on my challenger team? Like, you obviously seem like you're a good player and you're new. So if you want, like, come to the West Coast." And so instantly I'm like, all right, I'm fucking going to the West Coast, and bought a ticket, lived with him and his mom and like a 3-year-old kid in this tiny house with no AC. The internet had packet loss. It was a disaster, but it was so much fun. It was like just such an amazing experience to just be living with other people with the same passion that I have for the game, and who just legitimately are giving it all to the game without like looking back at other things, because obviously we're eating like 1 or 2 McChickens a day. We don't really have any money, but we're just playing League of Legends. So it was great.
I mean, it's crazy how far League has come. Like, you tell that story. I can't imagine, like, you ever hear, I just couldn't imagine you not doing this. So correct me if I'm wrong, but like, you know how like players occasionally complain about like how things are going, or like, oh my God, I have it so hard. You're ever like, you know what, back in my day, okay, I was homeless for 2 weeks. Okay, I snuck into a computer lab, I played video games, and I made rank 1 to get on a team, okay? So let's not complain here. Because I feel like I would just have to. It'd be like your stereotypical back in my days meme.
Yeah, I mean, eventually I did go back home because honestly I was exhausted. Because like I said, like, it's impossible to sleep. And at that point, my parents, I think they understood that they couldn't stop me from trying to do it, and so they just let me do it. So I did end up getting rank 1 under the comfort of my parents' apartment, but it was after they realized that like they couldn't stop me from trying.
Did you guys have a conversation? Did you work through that?
I'm not sure at the time if we sat down and had a conversation, but I think it was pretty implied that they were kind of accepting of it at the time. They would obviously, but like if we like say after I moved to the West Coast, like every month or so, whenever they would bring up like, have you thought about going back to college and like all this stuff. But that's just responsible parent stuff, right? Like you see your kid doing something that's obviously completely unstable. It's very foreign territory. At the time, it's not like players were getting paid a lot. Like the best players in NA were making like $5K a month. So it's like the best player is making $60K a year. Like it doesn't even seem like the risk is worth it. So
when you went to live over in California, was it just like, bye mom, bye dad, I'm peacing out, have fun? Was that like how that conversation went, or did they like?
Well, I'm trying to remember. I think I just told them that I was going, and I don't think they tried to stop me. Like I said, I think they realized that they couldn't stop me from trying to do what I wanted to do. Yeah. So at that point, they were trying to be supportive.
I did you ever think it would get to where it is today? Like looking back then, like moving to, like, did you have like hopes and dreams that it would be as big as like football?
Yeah, of course. I mean, to me, esports it's a sport. There's no difference. Yeah. Like I hate the argument when people are like, you're just watching people play games. Yeah, like, why don't you play games yourself? And it's like, you're just watching people play football. Why don't you play football yourself? Like, it's literally the same thing. And more people are enjoying watching, enjoying playing, and it just seemed obvious to me that eventually, as long as I got over the stigma of being like just video games to like the older population, then it's just gonna be considered a normal sport.
Yeah, I mean, that's still a risk though, because you don't know if it's gonna happen. And God, it's crazy. Do you ever look back now and think I was insane? Like I was insane to do this?
Yeah. Of course. I mean, like I said, I wish that I could try all the different paths, because at this point I could be graduated with college with like a computer science degree, or I'm 28. I could already be a doctor, to be honest. Like legit, all these different paths I could already know the answers to, but I'm glad that I did something that I would probably regret not trying. Yeah. And even though I had mixed results as a player, overall it was a fun journey. Did
you ever think, like, now that you are 20, we're actually the same age, by the way, Do you ever think now, like, maybe I'll go back to school? Are you still like super passionate about League of Legends? Or do you ever think of like, maybe there's these other paths that I want to explore now?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think about that at the end of every year, just because it's so insanely stressful being in esports. It's very unstable. Even the best coaches and players, it's unstable. Like Reaper just now got let go, even though he's like the most decorated NA coach in the past few years. So it's just something where it's very, very high stress. It's very rewarding at times. And yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said like I don't look at other options to be like, maybe I should like go back to college. Maybe I should like learn how to code. Maybe I should go into business side of League. Like there's so many different, more stable options. But obviously there's always a pull to be on the competitive side of anything.
Do you think you're going to be one of those people who always tries for the competitive, like being in coaching until you can't do it anymore, until you can't get a job anymore? Or are you going to eventually get to a point you think where you're like, you know what, I'm going to stop while I'm ahead and I'm going to jump into this other thing?
I'm not sure. I think it's hard to answer that question because like I said, like every year I do weigh my options and kind of figure out what I want to do. But it does seem like every year there's more of a pull to do something more stable than there is to stay in the competitive side, just because I've already had like highs and lows. So like I've already experienced so much of it that it's not like too new to me besides like winning like a championship. That would be like the only thing that's new.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense. This brings me to another very interesting question then. Kind of looking at the player side and you being a coach, do you think that there is an age out of players? I know this gets brought up all the time that, hey, you see both sides. Either people are too old to be playing anymore, or there's no reason why people can't be older and still playing. Do you think that there is an age out?
Yes, but it's much higher than people think. And it varies per role. Because obviously, like mid lane and ADC, they're more mechanically intensive. And even like people meme about support, but some support matchups you have to have like really precise fingers and stuff. But there are some roles that are just way more brain oriented, and it's way more important to have like such a depth of knowledge than it is to actually be super precise with your fingers. And if you watch like even at Worlds, like there are some like skill gaps, but for the most part, like the best teams they just play good League. Like they don't really do anything special. They just follow the rules. They pick the correct champions when they need to, and they just follow the basic fundamental rules of the game and get a win without doing anything too crazy. And obviously every few games might be like a pop-off play, but for the most part, it's just, just play the matchup correctly. You don't need amazing fingers to do that. So I do think there is an age cutoff, but it's definitely not as young as people think it is. Like
where do you think it is? Like if you had to just guess. Do you think it's in the 30s?
I think it's probably early 30s. But
see, I think that's fair. I've always thought that it isn't necessarily mechanics that's what's the thing that stops the age. I think it's that as people get older, they want more stability. Because they realize as they're getting older, like, hey, I might want something that is more stable. And like the hours, like that is one of the things I've always said with esports is physical sports has a physical limitation that is a lot easier to see and say, hey, we need to stop at this point. I don't think esports really has that, and it's really hard to draw that line. And I think it's also individual where that line is for each individual player. So
yeah, I completely agree with that.
It makes it so hard to judge, hey, where is this? So I think it's more of like an age. It's not because they physically can't do it. It's because I feel like it's so weird that we're like, oh, these players are too old. It completely depends on the player and how much they want to keep putting in, because it's that mental line that they're able to draw, and that changes. So it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, you said it exactly. Like if you're coaching a basketball team, there's a physical limit to how many hours of basketball you can play a day. Like obviously afterwards you can still take your shots and you can take your free throws and practice that stuff. But for the most part, you can't just be playing basketball for 16 hours a day. But for League of Legends, you can. And so a lot of people were very surprised about Bjergsen's retirement. But to me, it's not that surprising because he literally pours his entire life. Like he's been credited for his amazing work ethic. And then you look back on it and it's like, wow, probably for the past 7 years, like he's really hasn't had a time to just be a person. Like he just plays League of
longer
Legends.
Than that, hasn't it?
It's been a long time. And
yeah, it's been insanely long.
And so it doesn't surprise me that he eventually just, he wants to be able to live the other parts of his life. So his burnout is just so relevant in the sport for the reasons you said.
Do you think that we're going to see more people doing these turns or retiring? Like, because there's some older players. If you look at all of the scenes, do you expect to see more transitions, kind of like Bjergsen, where they jump into maybe coaching roles or management, or they just completely retire?
Yeah, I think there's probably a new wave of players coming. Not only because like every year, like the new players are better and better, but yeah, just for reasons like you said, like the average age of an LCS player is getting older because obviously they're keeping a lot of like the older players too, and eventually the more successful players they're going to want to move on to do other things. Like they don't want to be in front of their computer for 16 hours a day for 10 years straight. Like it's very mentally taxing.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, you were a player. You gave up playing to coaching. Why did you give up playing? Did you feel like you couldn't cut it anymore? Was there a point where you're like, I'm done? What was the reason that you quit the playing side?
There were mixed reasons. Well, when I was a player, the infrastructure was very poor. Yeah, I would say that I didn't really have many tools to improve myself as a player, and I didn't really see myself improving over the course of my like 2-year quest to go professional. And I don't know, it just seemed kind of like an endless fight because, like I already said, like there weren't many tools for me to actually improve. Like I obviously subbed my games in LCS. I played an international tournament, and then I was the captain of the amateur team in 2015 for CLG. Yeah. But I didn't have any resources to improve. And so I kind of wanted to make that transition to the coaching side because it just seemed impossible to me that the teams were so poorly educated in terms of just their short-term and long-term growth, just as like players and as teams. So I just knew that I knew I could change it. I knew that I could help players improve.
Okay, so that's what you knew. Do you feel like that is true? Like you talked about, like looking back at legacies, do you feel like you're able to change that stuff as a coach? Because from my perspective, I would say that I don't think we're quite there yet, and I don't think a coach is high enough to make those long-term decisions when it comes to what we've seen with like teams and management and all of that stuff. Do you feel like you have that level of control as a coach?
I think like gameplay, education in terms of the game, yes. In terms of direction for the org, no. Okay. I think for the most part, orgs have their own business plan that they can choose to tie the coach into, but for the most part, it's their vision, and then
shouldn't those things go together though? Shouldn't those things be kind of synonymous?
I mean, I think yes. Most physical sports would say yes. They usually bring in a coach who has a vision, and then if the vision doesn't work out over the course of a few years, then they'll move on to the next coach because the project didn't work. But in esports, it's more just like short-term goals, like get the wins, get the dubs, get your bigger slice of the esports pie, and like that's what they're going for. They're not really going for the multi-year project of like trusting someone they hire to just head the project.
If you know that as a coach, does that change the way that you pick players? Does that change the way that you're going to be built? Because you basically have to be thinking short term, right? There's no other way around it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's slightly better now that spring split doesn't matter as much because you can take more risks. When you're building rosters in the beginning, you can take someone who's not proven and kind of build them up spring split, and then summer split, they might be ready to make like a run to worlds. But yeah, since every org goes into the split, or almost every org, and they're like, the goal is to make worlds, and then you're hit with a roster that is probably not a world roster, like you have to make the best out of it. And yeah, you have to make decisions to try to make their goals come true.
It's got to be insanely stressful with how much the game changes then. I don't think I would say that League of Legends doesn't change as much as like Overwatch. That was one of the things that we always struggled with in Overwatch is the game changes so quickly. Like they would do like basically you played 4 different games when I was coaching because we had 4 different like quarters and the game was like a completely different game every single time, and it was like every 6 weeks, the game was a new game, and you were like, well, we have to relearn the entire game now, basically. So it's not quite, but it's still pretty bad. From what I've heard, it still changes, and those changes have drastic effects on maybe who's going to be a better player, like depending on how play styles change. It's got to be incredibly stressful to deal with.
Yeah, it is pretty stressful because like you said, a lot of players have different strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes you'll have assassins in the mid lane. Sometimes you'll have control mages. Sometimes you'll have more mechanically intensive champions. And it puts a lot of stress on the players too, because then they really need to be this jack of all trades. They have to be able to have these big champ pools, understand the different styles, understand the way that their play style might have to change based on the evolving meta. So it's something that is tough because a lot of esports orgs don't have like such an extended roster. Like you usually have your 5 players, and that's what you have to work with. And the meta could change. It might be really good for you, or it might be really bad for you. And you still have to work through that and make sure that even though a player is weak at that specific style, like that's what you have, and you have to help that player improve. So it's very stressful. It
just seems really hard to set like any sort of goals when it honestly doesn't matter what goals you like. If you know, it's like the goalposts keep changing. It's like you set a goal and then Riot all of a sudden it's like, oh, guess what? We're making these changes. Good luck with your goalposts.
Yeah. I always joke about it in terms of basketball. Like imagine if every 2 weeks they're like, well, 3-pointers are getting a little OP here. We're moving the line back 4 inches. And it's like, well, too many points. So we're actually making the rim smaller, and it's like it's just like, how is that going to impact the game? And you have to try to figure that out as a team. Like players are heavily involved too. It's like, how do you think it's going to affect top lane? And they're like, well, now that this champion got buffed, I actually need to be proficient on this champion who's a counter, and like all this other stuff. So yeah, it's fun though. It's a puzzle.
it is a puzzle. This brings me to like, I have a couple of questions. I'm sorry if these are hard-hitting questions, Thomas. Okay, I'm sorry.
All right.
Okay. A lot of the results, I would say, fall on the coach's head. Do you think that, because I mean, it seems both internally and externally, but definitely externally, it seems that at least the outside world will pretty much always blame the head coach for results. It looks like it happens on the intern too, internal. But how much of that do you think is really, I don't know, acceptable? Like how much can we actually blame a head coach? Because from what you just said now, players seem to have at least a large amount of say. Coach probably has final say, obviously, but I've talked to other coaches too that have basically said that coaches have a significant amount of power, or players have a significant amount of power in like the decision making that kind of happens. So how much do you think is correctly attributed to blame coaches? Like, was Reaper really the one at fault?
Obviously, I don't know the specific details of the Reaper situation. I did work for him 4 years ago, and he seemed like a good coach. But things change, so I do think that the coach does have responsibility on his shoulders. When you take the job, you're kind of accepting the risks that go along with what goals the org has set up. But obviously, there are a lot of decisions that aren't completely up to the coach. And it's like roster formation, like I said, like in an ideal world, the coaches seem like they would know, like the coaches, the analysts, if they have scouters, it seems like they would know the space in terms of how to build a competitive team better than other people in the organization. So if those people are implemented in the process, it seems like it'd be a better process. But yeah, there are a lot of decisions that aren't 100% up to the coach. And from the outside, it seems like it should be the coach's decision because that's how it works in baseball. It's how it works in basketball and in football. And so from the public perspective, it's like, well, why did that happen? It's probably the coach because that's how it work in these other sports. So I don't blame the public for thinking that. It's just something where the space is very young, and eventually the people at the top are going to start to trust the people they hire, and the coaches are going to have more say, and it's going to be a more smooth process overall. But we're definitely not there yet.
Yeah. I find that fascinating. So I guess this was one of the things I wanted to ask is how much does a coach really have in this? And I imagine this changes team by team. But in your experience, how much does a coach have in, say, terms of like picking the roster and stuff like that? How much can we attribute to like, oh, this is a coach, or how much of it is based on like a team's marketing? Like, hey, we need this player because it's going to be, because that's a part of it. And I feel like if people ignore that, marketing is kind of an important aspect. Like how much of it falls on that, would you say?
Yeah, so it definitely changes drastically team to team. There are obviously different ways to run an esports org, and I feel like that's the best way to answer this question without me saying things that are bad. But so there's obviously the winning. Like you can get your bigger slice of the pie by winning. The G2 way, the TL way, you just get the best players, you win, you get a bigger chunk of the pie. So obviously, League of Legends, just think of it as a pie. Every team has their own slice, and the whole pie is growing because esports is getting bigger. And so you're just competing with each other to either maintain a piece of the pie or get a bigger slice of the pie. And so TL and G2, they're winning, they're getting a bigger slice of the pie. The other option you can do if you're like, you know what, we're probably not going to win, and we don't really want to spend the money in that direction, is to get players with branding. And so you get players with a lot of followers, you get players that have a big reach with fans, and that way you can get a bigger slice of the pie by, if you're not the best team, if you're still like top 5, you'll still get good impressions, you'll still get your bigger slice of the pie. And so those are like the two main ways to do it. And yeah, it's kind of up to the org which path they want to take. Obviously, as a coach, I'd prefer to do the winning path, but it's not it's not that simple sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever get into have you ever gotten into a situation where you didn't have as much choice and you're like, wow, like it seems like you'd almost be set up for failure depending on the expectation. Unless the expectations were, hey, you don't have to worry about winning, which I don't think any team ever thinks about. Okay, I'd be very surprised if Virgil, listen, you don't have to worry about winning, do the best you can, have fun, good luck. This is what we're giving you. We know it kind of sucks, but just whatever I feel like that never happens. That would be interesting if it did, but I don't think it does. Do you ever feel like, wow, my expectations like early on are going to be really hard?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I'm pretty sure most people in esports have that feeling. Just because, like I already said, it seems like every year, for the most part, teams are expecting who they hired to go to Worlds, and that's obviously not the case. Only 3 teams are going to Worlds, and from, like I said, people on the inside, they usually have a pretty good idea of the teams that can be contenders to go to Worlds, and it very often does not line up with the expectations of the upper management.
Yeah, and there's probably, I imagine that there's got to be a price aspect to that too. Like the teams that are willing to spend X amount of money probably have a significantly better chance at making those 3. There's probably some correlation to money spending too. Yeah,
I mean, I'm pretty sure I think it was the last 2 years actually. If you just rank the teams based on how much money they spent, it's like pretty much exactly the standings. There are some outliers. I think Golden Guardians this year was like an outlier. They performed really well based on their budget. But for the most part, it is like pretty just spend money, do better. Does that ever, like people always talk about like esports bubbles. Is that something that ever scares you as a coach, right? Like, wow, the only way you can do this is by spending more money. And so there's either going to be a point where teams are like, okay, I'm not willing to spend more money, which I don't know if has happened yet, based on the fact that Jensen has a $4.2 million contract over 3 years. Yeah. That sounds like that increased spending there. I'm just throwing that out there. Yeah. But do you ever worry that, hey, this is insane where we're getting at? Because it doesn't seem like there's good ROI. Do you ever worry about that? I guess I worry about it a little bit, but it's still like, if you look at the valuations of the companies, they're going up, they're going a lot higher too. So even though the salaries are like getting bigger at an insane rate, like you are getting better valuations for the companies. But yeah, I would say that the step to kind of get rid of spending money equals wins is just starting to listen to the people that you hire, because that's like the best chance you have to like, you know, play the Moneyball game to get players that are undervalued, because that you're on the inside and you know the player's undervalued. Whereas like from the outside, they just kind of like pay based on like a hierarchy that like is pretty like publicly well known. Like you don't get like the individual details.
This is an interesting question then for me. Do you think that the Moneyball aspect can be done in esports? Because I have a lot of coaches who say that it can't be done, that you can't Moneyball your way into a win.
It's harder, just because I do think there is a, what's the word? There's a greater spread of talent like in a scene, whereas like in LCS, if you're looking at it, like they're very clearly like the best players like middle of the pack and ones at the bottom. So it is harder to like get like an unseen gem, but there are aspects that you can play Moneyball in. Like I'm gonna bring Golden Guardians up again. Like they did a really good job. Like they brought in Closer, they brought in FBI. They're both very very talented players for cheap that performed like top players in their roles. And so there are ways that you can work around the fact that like all these well-known players, like everyone knows where they're at, but you can like scout other regions. You can bring in players that are less known, and you can take those risks to be able to make it so that you can actually like make a run and be one of the better teams with a lower budget.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that like, because the main thing that like Moneyball uses is different statistics, right? Like that's the principle behind Moneyball is that you rank it based on
percentage and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's all that stuff. But a lot of people say that doesn't really work for League, as well as the fact that because the game changes, the valuation that you might put on each of those statistics also changes, like every time that a patch basically happens. Do you think that statistics are useful in League of Legends?
Yes, it's very unexplored. I think that in a few years, the statistics that are going to be developed are going to be very useful, but right now the statistics in League are pretty garbage. Like it's just like, what's the dragon percentage this team has? And it's like, well, usually when they're winning, they're taking dragons. Like it's just like it matches up. And so there are things that are pretty good now, which is like jungle proximity, getting like specific maps, like heat maps of like where players are, like tendencies, like how does a team like control its ways before dragons, before objectives. But in terms of like raw statistics that are like really, really useful, they don't exist too much. So I'm expecting that to get a lot better. I'm hoping that teams are going to put a lot more effort into building those statistics out, especially this year. There's going to be more information on that too available to the teams. So it's really important that teams actually understand like this is literally like the future of analytics in gaming, and they have to jump on this or else they're going to be like very far behind, like, and very at a very big competitive disadvantage from the orgs that are going to be putting in resources to developing the statistics.
Mm-hmm. So I guess that is this like NA's hope? Is this where like maybe eventually they get the statistics here and they have people who build this? Because right now
maybe
I've always kind of like, you look at like EU and their ability to take like rookies, and their rookies end up doing like very, very well, but you don't really see that in NA happen that much. I don't know if it has as much to do with the talent pool or the fact that like they want to spend on like known talent. I don't really know. Do you think that this maybe pushes NA to be better, to have hope? Is there hope? Does this give hope? Because right now there's no hope.
Okay, so we're trying to give hope. I mean, hopefully, like, because NA orgs have more money, maybe they'll get better.
That's not very confident.
But I mean, if you're talking about just talent overall, if you just rank the regions by server population, like it's pretty spot on. Like, was it like China, Korea, Europe all have like a lot more than NA. NA has like, was it 2/3 of the players as EU? So just inherently, you're going to have a smaller talent pool in terms of players that can compete at like the highest level. And then like there's also the whole culture part, which is definitely, there's definitely some truth to that, where it's not, I would say the culture is not as competitive in the sense where like how badly a player wants to win in terms of like a team culture doesn't seem as prevalent as when say a different org from a different region. So that's like a whole problem in itself as well.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting because, what I find very fascinating about that is, generally speaking, from what I've heard, EU teams spend a lot less than NA teams. So it seems like that isn't something you can buy. You can't buy a level of drive necessarily, it feels like, or at least NA teams haven't figured out how to do it yet. So
yeah, it's fascinating. It's building a winning culture. There's definitely like a whole art to it that some orgs are. I mean, I'm pretty sure every org is trying as best as they can to try to get the right people in to build the winning culture. It's just something that might take some time, and it's like a combination of that with having like a smaller server population it makes it hard to compete at an international level when the winning culture already exists in other regions and they have like a bigger talent pool. So
do you think that teams are more focused on like going to Worlds, or maybe it's going, like, I look at it seems from the outside perspective that teams are more focused on winning their region than they are necessarily about winning Worlds. Like, that seems like a better marketing move. Would you think that that's an accurate assessment? Like, is that really the more important thing? Because it doesn't seem like they really have...
For NA?
Yeah, for NA.
Yeah, because, well, it just seems very far-fetched to win Worlds unless, like, you have TL budget, but...
Because that would explain a lot of, like, the moves, like, when people, when they buy, like, talent from other areas... It's not necessarily that they're looking to, it feels from the outside that they're not necessarily looking to win Worlds. It's like, how do I compete in just my region? Like, that feels like where the bar is set, is how do I win the region? If we go to Worlds, cool. If we do semi-okay at Worlds and make it out of groups, we're like fucking ecstatic. Like, that's like the...
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, we already talked about the expectations that orgs have. Like, every org is coming into the split being like, our goal is to make it to Worlds. And so if your goal is to make it to Worlds, are you really going to take the 18-year-old out of solo queue and try to train that guy to be good enough to help your team qualify for Worlds? No, like the safer thing, if the org really wants to try to make it to Worlds and they're putting a lot of pressure on the people they hire to do that, then you pretty much don't have like the leeway to take risks like that. So you have to take players that are proven talent. They might not be the best, but you know what you're going to get, and you can kind of build a system around that and try to rally the team to make a run to make it to Worlds. But until the expectations are more, I don't want to say fair, more reasonable, then it's going to be a lot harder for orgs to be able to take those risks when all like the people at the top just want to make it to Worlds every single year. They don't want a rebuilding year. They just want to, win.
Mm-hmm. I had James McCormick from Mad Lions on here, and one of the things that we kind of talked about was 10-man rosters, because that's one of the things he was like, this sounds like it might be a solution, but he thinks it's functionally impossible to do, mostly because of the amount of coaches that you need that are all on the same page and equally skilled, as well as the resources in general to basically pay 10 people who are 5 of them who are okay being like functionally substitutes. And he said that C9 was the only team that was kind of able to do it so far. Do you think that that's a correct assessment? Do you think, because everyone brings up, oh, you just need to get a 10-man roster. It's not really possible, is it? Or plausible, I guess.
Yeah, it's very unlikely that it will have a positive outcome when you have a 10-man roster. The talent pool is small. So like, already, if you're going to have players in the academy that like most likely aren't going to give up an LCS offer to play in academy, then they're not going to be better than some of the LCS players unless like it's getting someone from a smaller region so that they like want to play academy to prove themselves and then go to LCS. So it's really hard. A lot of players are not super capable of performing their best when they know that someone else right next to them is like competing for the same spot. Which is like a very normal thing that happens in sports. Yeah. But in esports, a lot of kids aren't growing up playing on teams. Like they're not used to that type of pressure. They're not used to competing for the starting spot with someone right next to them that they're supposed to work with to get to improve. To like both of them are supposed to work together to improve each other. Like they're supposed to try to get better together. Like that's something that is new for a lot of players coming into esports. So there's just a lot of stress and I do think it was a very good point where you need the entire staff on the same page. Like you need to be able to teach the same systems. You have to be able to teach the same like macro strategies, the same communication structures, and to have an LCS team and an academy team on the same page is so hard because the levels of play on both teams will be so much different that it's really hard to implement the same structure.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the player aspect and almost like, I guess, for lack of a better word, like the ego of like, I don't want to work with my enemy to mutually succeed. Do you think that part of it has to do with like maybe the contract aspect? Because even you mentioned being a coach, every year you're fucking terrified, right? Like you don't know if you're going to have a job next year. Do you think that long-term contracts are like a solution to this, like signing like a guaranteed tier-long contract where, hey, I'm secure for 2 years. I know I'm secure. I can actually work with. Do you think that maybe that's something that would fix this problem? Or do you think that's impossible because the game shifts so much that you don't necessarily want to keep a player for 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, there are some guaranteed contracts that have had mixed results, but for the most part, like a player usually isn't upset that he's being moved to academy because of his salary and stuff like that. It's just because like as a player and as a coach, you have to think of your value as a stock. And so when you're, performing well in LCS or performing well in the academy, it's going up. If you perform badly, it plummets really quickly. So like you really have to take advantage of your stock value when it goes up. And so even if you're having a 10-man roster, like you switch the guy from academy into LCS, unless you have very transparent social media, unless you have players being very vocal about the successful system, then it's going to look badly on the player that's being pushed onto academy. And it's going to hurt his stock value. And even if he's playing decently, it's going to negatively affect his career. So it's just a very tough situation. For the most part, I would say the only benefit of having like spending money on someone in spending money on an LCS caliber person for academy is when you just need someone to back up like a specific player in LCS who might have a toxic personality, so that you can like he at least knows that he has to be a better teammate, or we have someone else that can come in and like sub in for scrims or even replace him if he's not like that necessary level of a teammate.
How do you go about changing this fundamental it sounds like a cultural problem basically with like it sounds like it's not a small like problem, it's a very, very big problem that seems to affect widespread affect most players then that it's like it's just a cultural aspect. How do you start to fix that? How do you get that to where you can maybe, because otherwise it seems like we're fucked. I'm not gonna lie. Like it feels like basically NA will probably never amount to very much. Like they just have so much going against them.
Well, it just takes time, right? Like even look at FlyQuest. Like I would say it took them a while to figure out how to run an esports org. Yeah. Well, when I worked for them, it was just a coach and a manager, and that was the esports. Like, and then we had the 5 players. But after a few years, like they just got the finals twice. They have all of these fun charity things going on that are pulling in fans. They have really good system and infrastructure in terms of like the coaching staff and the players and like the type of game they want to play. So it just takes time. Like obviously it seems hopeless because there are a lot of orgs that are obviously don't have the best infrastructure, but it just takes time, and eventually they will get there. It's just how long is it going to take, right? Like, is it going to be a few years? Is it going to be 5 years? Like, do we have to wait for the people at the very top to be changed? Like, that's the question to me, is like, how long is it going to take before orgs like understand that you're going to have rebuilding years, you're going to have years where you're performing really well, but then you might not be able to maintain the players after that for like a year because their stock value is going to be high and they're going to want to capitalize on getting a higher salary. So it's just being realistic.
So it seems like most of it seems like it's upper management then. Like it seems like, because it seems like you being a coach going in, you can't necessarily you can't like magically click your fingers and all of a sudden all of your players are non-ego players who are going to work together and everything. Like it seems like it has to do with, I guess, more systemic upper management stuff. Would you think that's fair?
I would say coaches do have a really good opportunity to get everyone on the same page. Like, I don't want to say like the coaches have nothing to do with it. Like, a coach definitely can come in and they can get everyone to buy into a system. Similarly to how like we did it with Clutch last year, where the team wasn't performing very well, and then we brought in a new coaching staff, and then we were able to get everyone to buy into a system, get everyone to play together, get everyone to treat everyone like humans. And so coaches definitely do have the potential to bring together a team so that the players want to win and they want to play with each other and they want to perform well for each other. It's just something that's like, that is one aspect. There are just many aspects to it, like in terms of like roster formation and can you actually swap players if a coach wants to, and stuff like that.
Now you bring up Clutch, which I thought was interesting, the way that you guys change up your coaching role, and it seemed like everyone bought in. You guys had an amazing run with Clutch. I actually caught one of your games at one of the, I think it was St. Louis. I think you guys were playing in St. Louis at one point. I don't remember what game it was. It was a couple of years ago. But I was there. It was good. Great barbecue in St. Louis.
At Clutch?
I think it was Clutch. It's like 2016.
That was 2016 was...
I'd have to look. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was Dignitas.
2016 was C9.
I'm gonna look. I'm gonna look now. I'm gonna look. I have the data. It would have been. It would have been. Sorry, wrong dates. 2019.
Oh yeah, 2019 was Clutch, but that was Detroit. Pretty sure.
Oh yeah, there. It was one of the. Okay, I went to Detroit one too. It was Detroit. Then. I go to a lot of these. Okay, yeah, I went to Detroit. Okay. I got them mixed up though. Yeah, it was Detroit. That was but I remember watching that. So you had an amazing run with Clutch, and then obviously they kept you on for 2020. What happened in 2020? Was it not buying in the system? Because obviously I don't think the season went as well as you guys would have liked. What do you think happened from your end?
So I would say that we had different views on the decisions we wanted to make. So obviously we went with a specific decision going into the year. And yeah, I would say from a coaching perspective, I don't think we were too successful in uniting the players and getting everyone to buy into a system. In the first 2 weeks of spring, I thought everyone was very nice and everyone was very open to listening to each other because we were winning. They had I call it the honeymoon phase, where
that's a good title, by the way.
Yeah, so it's like everyone comes together, everyone wants to prove to each other that they're good players, everyone wants to listen, be a good teammate, and everyone's listening to each other and we're doing well. And then eventually that goes away and we were unable to, until like week 8, week 9, kind of get everyone to come together again and be have that culture where everyone is, playing for each other and listening to each other and having good fundamentals and wanting to perform well in practice so that we can get better as a team. So I would say as a coaching staff, I don't think we were too successful with that. There are obviously tons of other things, but I can't really get into that. Yeah,
I know. Looking at you notice things aren't working out throughout the year. How do you deal with that stress? Because that's got to be one of the most stressful things ever. Because when you're doing well, you know that there's a level of security for things that are happening. But when you're not, you really don't know. How do you deal with that stress going through the season?
Yeah, I can usually tell when a problem is solvable from how do I say it? In terms of gameplay, if a problem is solvable or if a change has to be made. And so based on the severity of the problem, there are obviously different levels of stress. If it's something where, our fundamentals are just really bad at the 5 to 10 minute mark, we just have to do these 2 things, then it's the stress isn't that high, even if you go 0-2, because those are very simple things to solve. Just listen to each other when these 2 people are saying that someone's missing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if it's a glaring issue that I think there's a specific solution and we don't have people behind to have that solution, then it becomes really stressful because then I have to solve the problem doing something that I don't think is going to work. So that's when it's really stressful, because then as a coach, that this is probably not the most it's not the most likely way to solve the problem. So then
Yeah.
you have to do it a different way because that's like the easier thing to do.
Yeah, that's awful when you have to do that.
Yeah.
What kind of role of a coach do you play in a team? Like, obviously, there's different, I would say, coaches and strengths. Where do your strengths lie as a coach? Are you more of a people person coach, or are you more of a gameplay like type coach, or a mixture of the both?
I'd say just anything relating to the gameplay. I'm really good at just the analysis of the game in terms of, monitoring a room, getting the whole. I worked with Weldon for like 2 weeks in the beginning of 2019.
Yeah.
When I was a free agent, and there are obviously some things that are useful and some things that aren't too useful, but something that he is really good at is making sure that day to day there's just positivity in the air. Like you can get absolutely shit on in a game, and then afterwards he'll bring up some things that the team actually did pretty well that they weren't doing well at before, and then you actually get some positivity in the air. So there are things like that I have been working on, but in terms of my strengths, it's definitely just anything related to the game, and I'm good at like empowering my players. Like if they're really good on specific champions or they want to play a specific way, then I'm all for it. I just need to know like how we want to play as a team, form a system around that, and then form drafts. And yeah.
Okay. I think that's really good for people to kind of see. What strengths do you think you have that other coaches don't have? Where do you think that you lie? Where, you know what, this is the reason why people want to hire you comparative to other people.
Well, like I said, my analytical side, and then also the fact that I was a player. I feel like when I watch a lot of coaches do VOD review, like whether it's like Twitch streaming a VOD review or someone's like watching Worlds and they're doing analytics about it, they don't 100% understand what a player is going to know and what a player is not going to know, because they might not be like a challenger player or a grandmaster player. So they're not going to see something the same way the player is going to see it. So they might go into an explanation for 2 minutes about why a player shouldn't do something. And the player is like, yeah, like he already knows that. Like he already knows, like he just missed his skill shot. It was actually a fine decision. Or it's like, he already knows it's something stupid because like these things on the mini map. So there's
like the specific and stuff.
So yeah, I would say the fact that I was a player definitely helps be able to make sure that I'm saying like the useful information to my players, because then I'm not saying stuff that are really obvious to them and stuff like that.
Do you think that you need to be a player to be a coach? Do you think that that's something that is, because I know some people have that idea that you like. I've seen some players who said you'll never really understand me because you were never a player, which I think is a cop out, by the way. For things, but that's my opinion. But do you think that you need to be a player to be a good coach?
No, I don't think so. You just need to have you just need to be respected by your players. So it's a really easy way to gain the respect, is to be like, I've been challenger solo queue for 6 years now, like, or they know that you played on stage.
It's just extra buy-in. It's like an extra thing to get them to buy into whatever system you're doing.
So from their point of view, it's like, okay, this guy's not an idiot. Like he knows how to play the game, and it seems like he knows what he's talking about. So you automatically get that level of respect. But for sure, like if you're like no matter what your rank, like if you're just very smart about the game and you put a lot of time into your craft, then you can know just as much as a professional player. You just need to work harder to get that initial level of respect. And as of now, it does seem like there are a few people that are not super highly rated themselves that are in that position in League of Legends.
Yeah. So kind of maybe side shifting more to the business side of esports again. Looking at, I guess, public salaries. I know one time you kind of like years ago, you kind of mentioned like let if they want to announce their salaries, then that's fine. That's up to them. Do you think that like maybe public salaries or salary cap or something that you would like to see as a coach, because it would level the playing fields a little bit? Like, is that something that where you can be like, because unless you're on like Team Liquid, salary caps are, I would say, beneficial, right? If you're someone who has seemingly infinite amount of money, it seems that salary caps would be something you'd never want.
Yeah. Probably not a salary cap. I mean, it's good for the esport itself to just have more money in the system. So I just want to see more growth. It does seem like there will be more growth by just having no salary cap. So Maybe that changes in like 10 to 15 years, but as of now, like we just want more growth. We just want the sport to be bigger and bigger, and the more money that's involved in the sport, it seems like the better.
Awesome. Well, believe it or not, we've been here almost an hour and a half. Time flies, right? Hopefully you enjoyed your time here. If you didn't, too bad. You're almost. I actually have one question for you. Arguably the hardest question I will ask you.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. So, having had the experience being on the show, if you could see anyone being on the show, the only criteria is they have to speak English because it's the only language I speak, and they have to be involved in esports, media production. They can be in front of the camera, behind the camera. They don't necessarily have to be a player. They could be a coach. Could be just involved in like media. Who would you like to see on the show?
I mean, there are some good personalities. How many league people have you done?
I don't. If you name someone who I've had, I will let you know.
Have you done more people on the staff side or the player side?
Oh, I think they're about even now. I think you probably get. I've had Amazing, Zig. It might be even more on. I've done over 80 interviews, so like unless you name the name, it's gonna be hard for me to know offhand. I want to say I've done 3 or 4 players.
Okay.
I feel like maybe it's higher staff side though, or it will be here soon.
Okay, so I think Demonte has good interviews. Artemis, so does do really good interviews as well, and yeah, I think both of those are really good people to interview.
Awesome.
One player, one coach.
I think that's good. I'll try to get both of them. That being said, I actually don't have any more questions for you. That's all my questions. Hopefully you enjoyed your time here. If you have any shout outs, you're more than welcome to give them. Otherwise, I'll close out the show.
No, I think I'm good. I mean, thanks for watching, guys. And I guess if I have fans watching this, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for listening. Hopefully it was a fun VOD to watch, and hopefully you learned something. If not, then I'm sorry. But it was a lot of fun to do.
Awesome. Of course they're going to enjoy it. If they made it to your ending, they enjoyed it. So, I mean, that's the way that works. If you didn't enjoy it, then I don't know what's wrong with you. Thank you so much for being on here. I appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. For everyone out there, my name is Blake Panishevitz, and until next time, I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Oh, hello there. I hope you enjoyed this video, so please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Shout out to all my Patreons who support me. If you're looking to support me, you can find my Patreon at patreon.com/improvblake. You can also find me streaming throughout the week at twitch.tv/improvblake.